Hey, this is Coach Keita Bussey with 180 Firearms Training Podcast. Today we have Grant Chancellor Madison and our guest, Ashley Sullivan, who's fresh off an IDPA major match. We wanted to bring her in and talk about the IDPA side of things a little bit, but she does shoot pretty much everything. So today we are talking about DQs. We are going to talk about things that we've seen, things we've experienced, how we can try and prevent these DQs, what to watch for, that sort of thing. So Grant, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. So obviously the most common way people get DQ'd is breaking the 180 or the 90. One of the ways I have seen someone actually get DQ'd is he had a malfunction. It was a course where he needed to shoot a target that was kind of 85. And he had a malfunction, so he immediately starts to try clear it. And what happened is he's pulling the slide racker on his open gun and pulled the gun, trying to clear the stuck round, and pulled it over the 90. So even though you kind of left in a position where you are engaging on the 90, if you do have a malfunction or something that you need to manipulate the gun for, you need to be cognizant that you need to actually turn and face down range, even if it's going to slow you down. The fact is, you've already got a malfunction. Don't get DQ'd while clearing it. I don't like stages that have DQ traps that have a target that is literally on the 90. And if you engage it 1 centimeter too far, it's a DQ. I just think that's poor stage design, especially if it's a target that's placed where you kind of are moving quickly or running fast. And now you have to either stop and shoot this target, or maybe it's not available before it actually gets to the point that it's on the 85 or the 90. So I just think that we should try and avoid those in the stage design, but yeah.
Now, I do incorporate stages like that into my class because it creates a teachable moment and into drills that I give to people. So we do need to be practicing that, having targets right on the 90. But in a match, I do agree that we don't want to really be pushing that and creating a quote unquote trap. So yeah, I do agree with that, but we still need to practice it so that we're proficient at not breaking the 90. What do you have, Ashley?
Yeah, agreed.
I actually had a guy at a local steel challenge match, full on turn around and try to walk off the range with his gun in his hand.
Was it loaded?
Yes. He was, I think it was on Smoke and Hope, and he did the first one. I'd kind of been watching him all day because I didn't know him, but I'd shot with him a couple of times. And it was on Smoke and Hope because we were on Baby. So he shot it once, he did okay. He shot it again. He had major gun malfunctions, like bad. So he started getting a little more mad. And then he shot it one time and just went gun in hand, like this, and threw his hands up, turns around, gun in hand, and starts to just walk off the bay with everyone behind him. The entire squad, including myself, all screamed stop. I think a few people may have even jumped out of the way, I don't know. But it was one of those instances where he had shot by himself at the range so many times, and he was just used to shooting in front of a table and then walking back to the table with his gun in his hand. And I think it was something in his head. He kind of forgot where he was and that there were 10 people behind him. And he just turned around and was just going to walk off the bay with his loaded gun. So that was that's probably my scariest SO DQ moment, because the whole squad just froze and said stop, except for the few people that probably got out of the way. I don't really remember because I was so focused on that guy. It was really scary. So I would say, always be cognizant of where you are and what you're doing. And if this was still challenged. We wasn't even any movement. And he still just turned around with the gun.
You know, the scariest things I've seen have always been related to low blood sugar and heat and people not thinking clearly anymore. I had an elderly gentleman shooting a stage and he got confused. He was like outside the fault lines engaging targets, trying to find them all. He just got really confused, and then he knew he wasn't engaging all of them. So with his finger on the trigger, hunting for a target, he turns around and faces me. I had the timer in my hand, and I didn't want to startle him because he had a loaded gun pointed at me with his finger on the trigger. And I just said, like very gently, stop, turn around, face the gun down range. And he just followed the directions because I really think he had heat stroke or something, or the onset of heat stroke, and wasn't thinking clearly. So he needed like gentle prodding so he wouldn't shoot me accidentally. He was very confused, and everyone behind me hit the deck. They were all face down on the ground. It was very scary. And I saw another incident where a guy just had low blood sugar. It was getting late. We hadn't had lunch yet. And he got confused between unload and show clear, hammer down holster, and make ready. So he was making ready and did the hammer down holster and shot himself in the foot.
Whoa.
So definitely make sure you're hydrated, your blood sugar levels are even. If lunch gets pushed off, make sure you're taking care of yourself. And if you can feel that, oh, this heat is really getting to me and starting to get confused, you need to make that call and say, you know what, I'm not safe to shoot anymore. And you need to call it for yourself.
Well, and I've had squad mates before who've warned me, hey, I have, I'm on this medication, or I have problems with my blood sugar, or I have problems with heat, because I live in South Texas. We have a lot of problems with heat here for most of the months of the year. And so if you know you have that kind of condition, tell your squad mates. Tell them, don't be embarrassed because, you have a condition or you're on medication or whatever. Tell them, because you're walking around with a loaded gun in your hand. I mean, that's something that they need to know. And then you can also, it helps them watch out for you so you don't injure yourself.
And it helps with accountability as well.
Yeah, one of the things I definitely have to do if it's a hot day, take a towel, wet it with cold water, wrap it around my neck, so that the blood flow going into your head is actually a little bit cooler.
So there was a recent incident where a gentleman was shooting a stage and fell, pointing the gun to the opposite bay and sent a round right in between two people. So I know a lot of you have seen my book cover where I'm running with a gun over my shoulder next to my ear. And, a lot of defensive shooters, a lot of IDPA shooters even will see this and say, that's unsafe. Well, what would be unsafe is doing anything but this. If I'm running uprange and my first target is on that side, if I'm doing something else and I fall, your natural inclination is to catch yourself with your hands. But if I'm doing this, then I've got my elbow there, my finger is off the trigger, and the gun is going in a safe direction, even if I do fall. And if this guy had been doing that, this wouldn't have happened. So practicing uprange movements first with a dry gun and looking at these techniques, you might feel like it's unsafe because you've never done it before. So practice it with a dry gun. And I would say even practice falling with a dry gun. So you have it in your muscle memory, you have it in your head. This is how I catch myself if I fall, and keeping the gun in a safe direction. Your priority is the direction of that firearm and finger off the trigger, of course. And if you have to get hurt to keep that gun in a safe direction, get hurt, because it could be someone else's life.
Yeah, skinning a knee or an elbow is a whole lot better than shooting somebody or shooting yourself. Because there was an
Yes.
incident a few years ago of a guy that fell on his gun and shot himself in the stomach. I think it was somewhere in Florida or somewhere
There
out there.
was
East, I mean.
another thing is if you start to drop your gun, don't try to catch it.
Mm-hmm.
There was another gentleman who tried to catch the gun when he dropped it and shot himself right through the heart, and he died on the spot.
Yeah.
So if you drop your gun, just let it go. Take the DQ. It's not worth dying for.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and I don't care how expensive your gun is. Drop it on the sand.
And
yeah,
according to the rules, if the gun is outside your control, that's a DQ anyway. So if you drop it and catch it during that time, it was outside your control. So you're already DQ'd.
yeah.
So there's no point in trying to catch it. You're not going to keep going.
Yeah. And there is a slight difference as far as dropping your gun in IDPA versus USPSA. Both of them, if you're on a stage loaded and you drop it, you're out. But in IDPA, even if it comes out of the holster off the stage, like you're just walking around the range, if your gun hits the ground, you're disqualified.
Huh. Well, yeah, I guess it's kind of the same thing. If you take that gun out or if it falls out of your holster or something while you're walking around, yeah, you're also going to get DQ'd.
In USPSA, if the gun falls out of your holster, you stand there, you can't walk away from it. You have to stand there and send somebody else to go get a range officer.
Yep.
Then they have to supervise the picking up of the gun and the reholstering. And the way we play with each other, if that happens, everyone is going to start kicking dirt on your gun because we're all jerks. It's just part of the game.
So there was something I wanted to add to the falling. One of the things that I found super helpful in training was running with that horrible, dreaded, evil weight vest. But
I always think of Andy Whitley whenever you say that.
Aquaman. So I've taken Kita's classes a couple of times, and everyone just moans when the weight vest comes out because nobody wants to put it on and run with it. But what it teaches you is to keep your feet under you, because if you outrun your feet, you're going to fall, and you're going to fall really fast in that weight vest because all the momentum. And in watching some of the falling videos, because I've watched a whole bunch on YouTube trying to go, what really happened? What happened? Where did it fail? How can I avoid this? Not only as a shooter, but also as a stage designer. And there's things you can do as a stage designer to keep people from falling, like don't put down a fault line in a running path, or make sure that when you lay out your stages that there aren't giant holes in the ground where someone's going to have to run, or a rock or whatever. But as a shooter, there are things you can do ahead of time to prepare, like practicing falling with an unloaded gun, running around with a weight vest, also with an unloaded gun, because you don't want to do that with a loaded gun. And a lot of people don't practice uprange running as much as they should. If y'all haven't read it, Kita's book, it clearly defines how to run uprange depending on what target you're going to engage at the end. So read those chapters and watch the videos, because it makes so much more sense to run with the gun here or run with the gun, back and down, depending on which way you're turning, than some of the stuff that I've seen. I've seen people running up range that whack their gun on walls because they have it like out like this as they're running up range with their shoulder behind them. And it's not only slower, but your gun's behind you. Like you can't see this at all. So it's different things like that that I really appreciate through watching the videos and learning and taking classes, that stuff that you'll see at matches that maybe you hadn't thought of before and think, I need to practice this weird thing just in case it comes up.
Yeah, getting around walls for sure. So the book Ashley is talking about is Smart Move, Economy of Motion for the Shooting Sports by Kita Bussey. That would be me. You can find it on Amazon, or if you would like a personalized copy, you can email me 180firearmstraining@gmail.com.
Yeah, walls can be awful. So we had a guy actually get his shirt caught in a wall. Andy, it was Andy. I mean, we're not supposed to say names, but
this is the Andy show now. He's not even here.
He did. He was. There happened to be, I think it was a zip tie that was cut wrong or something, and he had one of those thin shooting shirts. Oh my God, he came around that corner so fast, and it caught him so hard, it spun him around the wall. Thankfully, he caught his gun just when it passed the 180, so he didn't actually flag anybody. But he just stopped for a second. And you just watched him go take a big deep breath. Nobody said a word. I think the SO called stop, but he'd already well stopped himself. It was very, very obvious that he'd already stopped himself because it scared the crap out of him. He was so that wall just grabbed his shoulder and spun him around.
Now, when I was shooting an IPSC match internationally, after the walkthrough where we all kind of tested out the terrain, they came and dumped new gravel inside the fault lines. And I didn't realize how much more slippery it was than when I did my walkthrough.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a change in terrain like that, just be very, very careful. What happened to me was I was in the middle of engaging a target on the move when my feet just went right out from under me. So the shots, and I landed on my elbow, the shots still went into the target, but I just kind of sat there for a minute like, am I still in? And then I shot the rest of the stage sitting on my butt.
But
yeah, there's such a large array of like ground that you're going to encounter, soft sand, grass, mud, that you are eventually going to fall. Everyone's going to fall. Maybe that should be the new tagline: the people that have fallen and the people that are about to fall. So we want to make sure that we do that safely. And remember, you're running around with a gun that has, maybe it's an open gun, maybe it's a 2-pound trigger.
Mm-hmm.
That thing will go with inertia. So you need to be cognizant of where your finger is all the time while you're moving, and also record yourself to make sure that if you do fall, your finger's not in a position on the frame where it's easily bumped down into the trigger if you sort of smack your arm on something.
Yeah, that sympathetic response where your finger curls in, even if your finger is outside of the trigger guard, but across it like this, then it can easily still curl in. Where if you have it up on the slide, even if you get that sympathetic response and it starts to curl, it'll curl into the slide of the gun, not into the trigger guard.
Your hands are I need to grab something to stop myself from falling, and they're gonna grab trigger, and you don't want that, as we saw.
Yeah. There was an incident that I witnessed at a match a couple months ago where I had a friend who had a combined incident of what Keita just talked about and falling. He didn't notice that in the corner where everyone was shooting, the ground had kind of been carved out, and it was underneath the fault line. There was like a hole right there at the fault line, because a lot of people would run in really hot to the corner and then run out of that corner fast. So when he went to leave the shooting box to go to his next position, his foot got stuck underneath the fault line and he fell forward. He kept his gun pointed in a safe direction. Everything was golden. It was a bad fall too. You could tell it kind of rung his bell a little bit. And everything was great until he stood up. And as he was standing, he got up way too fast and he swept his hand. So I would say anytime you fall, anytime the surface has changed, look at it on your walkthrough. Make sure that everything is still the same as when you did your initial walkthrough. And then if you fall, you've already cost a bunch of seconds anyway. Just take the extra couple seconds, clear your head, think about where you are and what you're doing, and then get up and finish the stage. Because I've seen way too many people fall and get up and rush and then do something that is dangerous.
Yeah, he had his hand on the ground to push himself up and the gun here and just went like that as he was standing. And that was it was a hard fall, but he did everything perfectly on the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Just never rush getting up, like Ashley said. Grant, you have anything else?
Also, okay, USPSA, you have 5 minutes from the make ready signal, right? So if the ground changes or if it's raining or something, maybe because you're not going to be able to go full speed in the walkthrough. It's going to be very rare that you can actually go full speed in a walkthrough. Maybe you'll be able to carve out a section where you can actually run around on it. But if everyone's on the stage trying to walk through, it's probably not going to happen. So maybe during the make ready, if something does change or you notice something, take that time to run full. Maybe you'll get a lot of comments and jokes, but whatever. We're here to win, not look good. Maybe look good a little bit. Run through that position just to make sure that you're not going to fall.
Well, after the make ready, we can only move one step, but we do get a walkthrough while they're resetting the targets. And that's usually a good time to do a full speed into a corner that's questionable or something like that. Or if you know you have to get around a wall and it's a tight spot, go through that full speed to make sure now that you have this extension of the gun in your hand, you're not going to get stuck on the wall and end up pushing the gun past the 180.
Yeah, but use some time before you have to shoot it to at least go 100% on a certain position if you're worried about falling.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, find your 100% because your 100% might not be your normal 100% if you were running on grass or something like that. Or another one is slippery wooden surfaces. So if it rains and you're on a wooden plank, those get very slippery. So make sure you have shoes that are really good and supportive. And you don't want a super hard compound like football cleats, because those are going to slide on a slippery surface like wet wood. You want a soft compound rubber trail shoe. And you don't want the grip to be too aggressive, or let's say you are running in grass, that grabs onto the grass so tightly that it torques your joints and can actually cause damage and injuries. So the right footwear is really important. And if your tread is starting to wear, you probably are going to have to replace those shoes once a year, once per shooting season.
Sometimes less, depending on how much you're practicing with them.
Well, and that's why a lot of shooters will carry those shoes with them to the range and not put them on until it's time to shoot. And then as soon as they're done shooting, they switch shoes back to try and preserve that tread as much as possible.
Yeah, my shooting shoes stay in my FJ, and I usually show up at the range in flip-flops. So everybody's like, "You're shooting in flip-flops?" I'm like, "No, they're in the car."
I'm spoiled by my Loas.
I know, I love my Loas. They've saved my ankles so many times. There was we have a range, well, we used to have a range here in the Houston area that they had the strangest fault lines sometimes. They would either use this really big rope, or they would use these really wide fault lines. Not the little, 1x2s that most people use, but they were like I don't know, they were like that wide. So whenever it would get a little bit dewy on the ground and you try to stand on one of those fault lines, you'd slip right off the other side. And people kept getting foot faults and foot faults. So then they switched to the rope, and you could not stand on that rope because it was a round rope and it would move. And I always thought that it was really interesting that they would try to do that instead of just using the right kind of fault boards.
Right.
So the rope was kind of cool though, because then they could make, rounded corners and stuff. But anyway.
Yeah, I made a Q stage in Australia. I think it was, Australia. No, it was Canada. I made a Q stage. It was really fun with a big rope they found at a shipyard.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see what ranges can come up with, and then how to deal with it in a way that's safe without either injuring yourself or getting disqualified, or doing something else that you didn't intend to do.
Getting outside your comfort zone with a massive rope as a fault line is one. I mean, you can try and push it in your walkthrough. Try and get a little bit of extra room to shoot a target.
So Grant, have you seen anything in South Africa as far as DQs?
Apart from breaking the 90, and I also want to stress that 90, 91 are different. It's breaking the 90. So it's actually going to 91 in my understanding and viewpoint of the rules. So if I'm on the 90, technically I haven't actually broken the rules yet. I'm on the 90, it's fine. 89, 90, it's fine. 91 is where the problem comes in, and that's when you need to call a DQ. The problem is though, if you're not going to the 90, you're probably not going fast enough. You don't win matches by playing it safe. You win matches by going to 100%. And unfortunately, the 100% is sometimes on the ragged edge of basically staying in the match and not breaking any of the rules. So that's basically the main reason why people get DQ'd. There has been a DQ, and I fully support it, of a competitor who was DQ'd for unsportsmanlike behavior because he would not paste and reset the stage. Now, it was a small squad. I think he brought like a lawn chair or something. He was just sitting there. So there was warnings that were made apparently. And yeah, so I think that rule maybe should, I don't know how it is there, but that rule maybe should be used a little bit more, because
We do have it here. I have never personally seen it enforced, but we do have the potential, and I've heard it threatened, but never actually used, to get the squad motivated to start pasting and resetting. So
what we do, what we do in our group is if we see someone who's clearly doing that and we've told them, hey, you need to come reset, after they shoot, nobody resets their stage. So when we'll talk to the SO, not at a major, at a local. At a local, we'll talk about it and say, you know what, this guy or this lady is doing no reset. We've talked to them. They refuse to reset. So we're not going to tape when they're done shooting. They have to tape their own stage. And I think we've done it once, and it fixes it because they realize, they're like, oh, I guess I have to get up and tape now. I'm like, yeah, it's part of the sport.
So something I wanted to mention is what happens at the super squad level with potential DQs. So these guys have to push those boundaries. They're looking for that 10th of a second here and there, and they'll push right to the 90 to gain that 10th of a second. They're probably not breaking it, or if they do, they hope that they did it so quickly that nobody saw it. And that's typically what happens at that level, that they're doing everything so fast that if you are the RO, it makes you question, well, did they or didn't they? Because it's that close. And if you're thinking, did they or didn't they, you don't want to make that call. It has to be blatant. If I tell someone, you know, you were kind of close to the 180 on that one, what I mean is they probably broke the 180, but it wasn't drastic enough that I'm going to say 100% for sure they broke it. Instead, if I see the gun move past the 180 and it's very obvious, then of course. But if it's like 180.1, I mean, we're just humans. We have human eyeballs watching this, and we're doing the best we can. So I would say give the shooter the benefit of the doubt if they're not doing anything unsafe. If it's right on the 180, that's not breaking the rule. And who are you to say that it's not 179.9 with your human eyeballs? You've got to be sure.
Yeah. And the angle that you're looking at can change what you're seeing.
Yes. And it gets confusing when the fault line doesn't match the 180. Maybe it's at a little different angle, and it can skew your perception as well. So you've really got to be sure.
Yeah, we've had that where it's like the stage was built in such a way, I mean, it's a square bay, but the stage was built in a way where one of the targets, I mean, we asked the RO, where's the 90 on that? And it was like pretty much at the beginning. And if you walked up to the target and you looked at it and you really like the 90 was much closer than that, much more forward of the start position than where he was stating at it. But that's the kind of thing he's already stated the 90 is right there. You can't move beyond that point to engage that target. You can't necessarily push that boundary at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
So Grant, have you
Even if
ever
you disagree.
seen guys on the super squad do something that may have broken a rule so quickly they don't get caught?
I've seen people go really like questionably, what did you break the 90 on that? But honestly, from my perspective, if he's pushing the boundaries and he's trying to win, and I'm pushing the boundaries and I'm trying to win, you're not gonna run up and question, hey, Aro, did you see that? Because if I want to beat someone, I want to beat them at their best.
Oh yeah. You never call somebody out. That's no.
That's not sportsman behavior. You don't do that. Have I seen it? Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, cool.
And what I would say is, if a super squad guy does get DQ'd, he more than likely didn't do anything unsafe. Maybe he just broke a rule.
Yeah. At that stage, it probably definitely wasn't unsafe. And you also, maybe the ROs are more cautious about DQing the top guys in a way, because they know that it might create more issues than it's worth. So they'd rather be either 100% sure, or if they question it, like you said, they're just, okay, well, maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but to be honest, I'm not going to call that. Most of the ROs that I've met in majors have been pretty fair and pretty lenient.
Now, another thing is, if you see a new shooter do the same thing, they're probably going to get called on it, whereas a pro shooter doesn't, because they just seem more in control, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
All right, Grant, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram. It's grant.madison1. My surname was too long for Instagram, so I just kind of gave up. Or you can find me on Facebook, Grant Chancellor Madison. I don't have any cool websites or anything. I should probably look at that. But yeah, that's where you'll find me.
All right, and Tactical Poppins?
TacticalPoppins.com. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and MeWe at Tactical Poppins.
And you can email me 180firearmstraining@gmail.com for a personalized copy of my book to set up a movement course. And give me a follow, Kita Bussy on Instagram, or 180 Firearms Training on Instagram. Thank you guys so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having us. Ashley, lovely talking with you, and hopefully we'll see you at a match soon.
And thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. Have a good day.
All right, cheers.